The first thing I saw when I came back from town was a bright orange paper nailed to my cabin door. Notice of violation, property, not in compliance with HOA guidelines. At first I thought it was a joke. I mean, how could it not be? The nearest Starbucks was 20 miles away, and the only association I knew of was the group of deer that hung out behind the shed every morning. But then I looked closer. There was a name, a logo, and a signature that looked all too real. Lakewood Ridge Homeowners Association. I laughed out loud, a short, dry laugh that echoed off the trees. "You've got to be kidding me," I muttered. This cabin had stood here for over 50 years, built by my grandfather, William Carter, with his own hands. Every nail, every beam, every stone in the chimney carried a story. He used to say, "You don't just own land, son. You become a part of it." After he passed, the land sat empty for a while. My parents wanted to sell it, said it was too far out, too much trouble to maintain. But I couldn't let go. 2 years ago, I left my city job, packed what I could fit in my truck, and moved here. This place wasn't just a house. It was home. And now some HOA was telling me I was in violation? I tore the notice off the door and headed inside. The smell of pine and old wood always calmed me, but not that day. My hands were shaking. Inside, I called the number listed at the bottom of the notice. After 3 rings, a woman picked up. "Lakewood Ridge Homeowners Association, this is Patricia." "How can I help you?" "Yeah, Patricia. This is Jack Carter. I think there's been a mistake. I got a violation notice on my cabin out here off Mill Creek Road." There was a pause. "Address?" she asked in that practiced customer service tone. 173 Old Mill Creek." She typed for a moment. "Yes, Mr. Carter, I have your property here. You are in violation of several HOA covenants. You're not authorized to have permanent residency on this parcel, nor any non-approved structure." "Permanent residency?" I repeated. "Ma'am, this is my family's land. Been here long before your little HOA even existed. I understand that's frustrating." "Sir," she said, voice perfectly calm, "but this area was incorporated into the Lakewood Ridge. Development 2 years ago when the adjacent lots were purchased and rezoned. You should have received notice by mail." My heart sank. "Rezoned? Incorporated? What did that even mean?" "Ma'am," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "this land has been in my family since 1968. There's no development here. It's just woods, lake, and this cabin." "I'm sorry, sir," she replied. "You'll need to bring your deed to our office for review. If the property doesn't comply, you'll have 30 days to vacate." "Vacate?" I barked. "You're trying to evict me from my own land?" "I'm just following procedure, Mr. Carter," she said quickly. "If you have documentation proving otherwise, we'll be happy to review it." The line clicked deal. For a long moment, I stood there, staring at the phone. The only sound was the clock ticking above the fireplace. 30 days to leave, from the home my grandfather built. The next morning, I drove into town and pulled out the old metal box my granddad kept in the county records office, the one with every deed, receipt, and boundary map since 1968. The clerk, a young guy named Mason, looked half asleep until I dropped the papers on the counter. "Hey, can you pull up parcel 9B off Old Mill Creek?" I asked. He typed, scrolled, frowned. "Huh, that's weird. Looks like part of that land got redrawn 3 years ago. Says it's under Lakewood Ridge now. Redrawn by who?" He shrugged. "County approved the change. Looks like a developer bought some of the surrounding property, got it rezoned for residential use. Guess your land got swept in." I felt the blood drain from my face. "Without my signature? Without notifying me?" He shook his head. "I can't speak to that, sir. You'd have to talk to the planning office." "Who approved it?" He squinted at the screen. Looks like a Daniel Pierce filed the request. Owner of Lakewood Ridge Development. That name hit like a hammer. Daniel Pierce. The same Daniel Pierce who tried to buy this cabin from my parents 10 years ago for pennies on the dollar. The same guy who bulldozed half the forest near the lake to build luxury vacation homes. I clenched my fists. He's not taking this land. Not while I'm breathing. When I got home that night, there was another notice. This one in a plastic sleeve, stapled right next to the front door. "Final warning. Non-compliance will result in legal action." And beneath it, handwritten in blue ink, DP. I didn't sleep that night. I sat by the fire, staring at the old photographs hanging on the wall. Grandpa with his hunting rifle. Grandma on the porch swing, knitting. Me, 8 years old, grinning with a fishing pole bigger than me. The land wasn't just property. It was a legacy. And I wasn't about to let some suit erase that. The next morning, a white SUV rolled up the gravel path. Out stepped a tall man in an expensive jacket, slicked back hair, perfect smile. I didn't need an introduction. "Mr. Carter," he said, extending a hand I didn't shake. "Daniel Pierce. I believe we have some matters to discuss." I crossed my arms. "You mean the part where you're trying to steal my grandfather's land?" He gave a soft laugh. "Steal? No. Just enforcing community standards. See, when the county approved the Lakewood Ridge development, your cabin fell within our association boundary. You were notified." "I wasn't notified of anything," I cut him off. "And even if I was, this land isn't for sale. It never will be." He smiled wider like a snake. "Everything's for sale, Mr. Carter. Some folks just don't realize it yet." My blood boiled. "Get off my property." He took a slow step forward, eyes on the cabin behind me. "You know, it'd be a sham if this place were condemned, old wood like that. One spark and—" I moved closer, my voice low. "Try me." For a second, his smile slipped. Then he chuckled, turned back toward his SUV. 30 days, Carter. That's all you've got. Then we take it to court." He drove off, dust rising behind his tires. I stood there long after he was gone, fists clenched, heart pounding. That night, as I went through my grandfather's old box again, I found something I hadn't noticed before of a folded, yellowed envelope tucked beneath the original deed. On the front, in Grandpa's handwriting, it said, "For when they come for it." And right then, for the first time since this all began, I felt hope. Whatever was inside that envelope, Grandpa had known this day might come, and he'd left me the key to fight back. The envelope was old, the kind of yellow that only time and secrets could make. Grandpa's handwriting was rough, shaky in places, but the words were clear. "For when they come for it." I sat at the kitchen table, the lamplight flickering across the old wood, and carefully opened it. Inside was a folded letter and what looked like an old hand-drawn map. My heart beat faster as I unfolded the paper. "To whoever finds this," it began in Grandpa's strong, looping cursive. "This land don't belong to banks, developers, or any association. It was granted to our family under the Carter Land Trust. 1968. You'll find proof under the north corner stone, marked with my initials. If anyone ever says this cabin ain't yours, you show them the truth. Don't let them take what we built." Under the letter was the map, a sketch of the cabin, the lake, the property lines, and an X drawn near the edge of the north clearing. Grandpa's initials, WC, were scribbled beside it. I didn't even wait until morning. The forest was silent that night, except for the crickets and the faint hoot of an owl in the distance. The air smelled of pine and damp earth. I followed the path to the clearing, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. I found the stone easily, flat, wide, half covered in moss. My hands were shaking as I dug around it. After a few minutes, my shovel hit something hard, a small metal box. I pried it open, my heart pounding. Inside were 2 documents sealed in plastic. One was the original Carter Land Trust certificate, stamped and signed by the county clerk in 1968. The other was a notarized letter naming my grandfather, and by inheritance me, as the rightful owner, independent of any subdivision or HOA incorporation. "Holy hell," I whispered. "He really did think of everything." I could almost hear Grandpa's gravelly voice in my head. Never trust a man who wants to own what's already free. The next morning, I drove straight to the county office. The same clerk, Mason, was there. He looked up as I dropped the documents on his counter. "You might want to take another look at this land rezoning," I said. He adjusted his glasses scanner. The papers, then let out a low whistle. "Man, this is legit. Land Trust Agreement, Carter Family, 1968. These hold up stronger than most modern deeds. They can't just absorb this into a new development without your signature. So that means—" He nodded. "That means you own it outright." "HOA's got no claim." I let out a laugh, the first real one in days. "Can you make copies of those? I've got a meeting with some people who aren't gonna like this." That afternoon, I pulled up to the Lakewood Ridge HOA office, a sleek new building that looked painfully out of place against the backdrop of old trees. Inside, everything smelled like coffee and printer ink. The woman from the phone, Patricia, looked up as I walked in. "Mr. Carter," she said, forcing a polite smile. "We weren't expecting—" "Yeah, I figured. But I brought something you'll want to see." I placed the land trust documents on her desk. She read them slowly, her expression shifting from confusion to disbelief. Where did you get these?" she asked quietly. "My grandfather left them," I said. "This land has been under the Carter Trust since before your HOA even existed. You people have no authority here." She looked uneasy. "Mr. Pierce will want to verify—" "You tell Pierce he's got two options," I interrupted. "He can retract those violation notices, or I'll see him in court for attempted property fraud." I turned to leave, but before I reached the door, she said softly, "Be careful." "Mr. Carter, Pierce doesn't lose easily." That night I found out what she meant. I woke up to the sound of tires, crunching on gravel, headlights, sweeping across my window. Two black trucks parked by the gate. A few men stepped out, flashlights in hand. I grabbed my jacket and stepped onto the porch. "Hey, this is private property," I shouted. One of the men, tall, bald, wearing a Lakewood Ridge jacket, called out, "We're conducting a safety inspection. HOA protocol." "At midnight?" I barked. "Get off my land before I call the sheriff." They didn't move. One of them smirked. "We'll be back in the morning, Carter." "You can't hide behind that shack forever." When they finally drove off, my hands were trembling. I'd grown up around hunters, storms, and backwoods brawls, but this was different. This was organized. They weren't just trying to take the land. They were trying to scare me off it. The next day, I drove to the sheriff's office with the documents in hand. Sheriff Daniels was an old friend of my grandfather's, tough as leather, but fair. He flipped through the pages, whistled. "Damn, this is solid, Jack. Pierce doesn't have a legal leg to stand on." "Then why is he still acting like he owns the place?" Daniels sighed. "Because money talks louder than truth around here. But listen, if they come back, you call me. Don't take matters into your own hands." I nodded, though a part of me already knew that if it came to it, I wouldn't back down. 2 days later, I heard a knock at the door. It was Patricia again, but this time she looked nervous. "Mr. Carter," she said softly, I shouldn't be here, but you need to know something." I stepped aside, letting her in. "What's going on?" She hesitated, glancing toward the window like someone might be watching. "Pierce didn't just rezone your land. He bribed the county board to approve the incorporation without public notice. And now he's planning to push a forced compliance order, basically claiming your land's a fire hazard so he can get it condemned." I clenched my jaw. "You have proof?" She nodded. "Emails, signatures. I can get them, but if he finds out, I'm finished." "Why help me?" I asked. She swallowed hard. "Because I grew up here too. My granddad used to fish on this lake with yours. And Pierce, he's ruined everything. Someone needs to stop him." For the first time, I saw the fear in her eyes and the courage underneath it. "All right," I said. "We'll stop him together." That night, we spread out everything we had across the kitchen table, the trust documents, county maps, and the evidence Patricia had smuggled out on a flash drive. Emails, transaction records, and a scanned copy of a forged approval letter. The name on the signature line? I looked at Patricia. "This is enough to bury him." She nodded. "But we'll need to go public. County won't act unless they're under pressure." I smiled faintly. "Then let's give them pressure." The next morning I uploaded everything. The land trust, the forged rezoning forms, the bribe evidence, to a shared drive. Then I sent it to every local news outlet in the county. By evening, it was everywhere. Developer accused of forgery, illegal HOA expansion. Local man fights to save family land. Reporters showed up at the gate. Neighbors I hadn't seen in years called, offering support. The community that Pierce thought he owned was turning against him. And then, just as the sun dipped behind the trees, a familiar white SUV pulled up again. Pierce stepped out, looking less smug this time, more desperate. "You think you've won, Carter?" He sneered. "You've just made yourself a lot of enemies." I stepped closer. "Maybe. But I've got something you'll never have." He raised an eyebrow. "What's that?" I looked out at the lake glowing orange in the sunset. "Roots." He didn't respond. Just glared, got back in his car, and drove off down the road. But as the taillights vanished, I knew this wasn't over. Men like Pierce didn't give up. They waited. They schemed. And if he couldn't take the land through the law, he might try something worse. So that night, I loaded my shotgun, locked the doors, and sat by the fire again. The cabin creaked softly, like it was whispering through time. "You're home, boy," I could almost hear Grandpa say. "Now protect it." The night after Pierce's visit, the woods felt different. Still. Heavy, like they were holding their breath. I sat on the porch, coffee mug in hand, watching the mist roll off the lake. The air was cold enough to sting. Somewhere far off, a coyote cried, its echo bouncing through the valley. For the first time in weeks, I thought maybe, just maybe, it was over. The news reports had blown up. The county was launching an investigation into Pierce and his development company. The HOA office was shut down pending review. Patricia had gone into protective leave under a whistleblower clause. It felt like the land could breathe again. But peace doesn't come easy to places that have been fought over. And I should have known Pierce wasn't done. That night, around midnight, I woke to the smell of smoke. Not from the fireplace. This was different. Bitter. Thick. Wrong. I jumped out of bed, ran to the window, and my stomach dropped. The tree line on the east ridge was glowing orange. Flames. For a moment, I froze, staring, disbelieving. Then instinct took over. I threw on boots, grabbed the fire extinguisher, and sprinted outside. The wind was carrying sparks toward the cabin. The dry brush caught fast. I could hear the crackle, the roar, like the earth itself was angry. "No!" I shouted, grabbing the hose from the side of the house, spraying the nearest flames. But it was spreading too fast. The ridge was burning like kindling. I backed up, coughing, eyes watering. My throat burned. And that's when I saw it, a figure standing at the tree line, half lit by firelight. Tall, still, watching. Pierce. He saw me notice him, then turned and disappeared into the dark. By the time the fire trucks arrived, half the ridge was scorched. The cabin had made it barely. A few embers had hit the roof, but the metal sheets held strong. Sheriff Daniels pulled me aside, flashlight beam flicking through the smoke. "You all right, Jack?" I nodded, still coughing. "Yeah, but that wasn't an accident." He sighed. "We found tire tracks near the clearing. 2 sets. We'll pull the security footage from the highway cameras." "Pierce was here," I said. "I saw him." Daniel's face hardened. "Then we'll get him. I promise." The next few days were a blur of insurance adjusters, reporters and investigators. But what none of them saw was what mattered most. The ridge. My grandfather's ridge. Half of it was black now. The trees he planted, gone. The trail where we used to walk on summer mornings, ashes. I stood there for a long time, hands in my pockets, staring at what was left. "I'll fix it," I whispered. "I'll bring it back." Behind me, footsteps crunched on charred soil. It was Patricia. She'd come back despite the risk. "You shouldn't be here," I said softly. "Neither should you," she replied. But I had to see it. Pierce's company's already trying to spin the story, calling it a natural fire. I turned toward her. "They'll bury it if we don't stop them." She nodded. "Then let's make sure they can't." We gathered everything. The photos of the fire, the footage from a neighborhood. Trail cam that showed Pierce's SUV driving up Old Mill Creek at midnight. The forged HOA filings, the trust documents. And built a case that no one could ignore. Patricia reached out to a local journalist named Ben Harlow, a stubborn old-school reporter who'd covered corruption cases for decades. He agreed to meet us at the diner off Highway 12. Ben listened quietly as we laid it all out. When we finished, he leaned back in his booth, chewing on his toothpick. "You've got yourself one hell of a story," he said finally. "And a bastard who's about to regret crossing the wrong family?" "Can you get it out?" I asked. He smiled. "By morning." The next day, every headline in the county read, "Developer suspected in arson as land dispute deepens. Whistleblower and landowner expose decades of corruption." Pierce's picture was everywhere. The sheriff's department confirmed they had issued a warrant for questioning. By sunset, TV crews were parked at the bottom of my driveway. But I didn't care about the cameras. I cared about the land. I walked the ridge again that night, boots crunching over blackened earth. I knelt by the old stone where I'd found the metal box. the one with Grandpa's initials carved into it. The fire had scorched everything around it, but that stone stood untouched. I ran my fingers over the letters, and for the first time since he passed, I spoke to him out loud. "They tried, Grandpa. But you were right. Some things can't be bought." The wind picked up, cool against my face like the land was answering. A week later, the sheriff's office confirmed what we already knew. They found accelerant traces near the fire's origin. Tire impressions matched Pierce's vehicle. Surveillance. Cameras showed him driving toward my property at 11:47 p.m. and leaving 20 minutes later. Pierce was arrested for arson, forgery, and property fraud. When they took him in, he didn't look smug anymore, just empty. And that was the end of Lakewood Ridge development. The county voided the rezoning. The HOA was dissolved. The land trust was reinstated with full protections. The ridge was mine again, legally, historically, spiritually. But what I didn't expect was how the town responded. People started showing up, old friends of my grandfather, folks who'd known the land before the developers came. They brought saplings, seeds, shovels. Together, we planted over 100 new trees on the ridge. Patricia came by too, her eyes bright despite everything. "You really think they'll grow back?" she asked. I smiled. "Yeah, might take time, but that's the point." She nodded. "You're staying here for good, aren't you?" "Where else would I go?" I said. "This is home." That evening, I sat on the porch again, watching the sunset bleed across the lake. The air smelled of smoke and pine sap. The fire had scarred the land, but it had also burned away everything false around it. It reminded me of something Grandpa once told me when I was a kid, sitting right here on this porch. "The land don't just belong to us, Jack, we belong to it. And when we forget that, it finds a way to remind us." I finally understood what he meant. This fight was never just about dirt and property lines. It was about remembering where we came from and defending it when no one else will. 2 months later, the county held a hearing to officially restore the Carter Land Trust boundaries. The courtroom was packed, reporters, neighbors, and a few of Pierce's former partners trying to keep their heads down. When the judge banged the gavel and said, "The Carter Land Trust stands as originally established in 1968, I felt my chest loosen for the first time in months. Afterward, Sheriff Daniels clapped me on the shoulder. "Your granddad would have been proud," he said. "Maybe," I replied, but I think he'd just say, "Took you long enough." We laughed, really laughed, and it felt good. That night, back at the cabin, I sat by the fire and opened Grandpa's letter again. The edges were fragile now, but the words still burned strong. "Don't let them take what we built." I whispered the words to myself, staring into the flames. "I didn't, Grandpa. Not this time." Outside, the wind rustled through the young trees, the ones we'd planted where the old ones fell. And for the first time in a long while, the ridge felt alive again. A few weeks later, I decided to do something I'd never done before. I put up a sign by the edge of the property, facing the main road. Not a warning, not a no trespassing. It read, "Carter Ridge, land of the free. May we always remember what's worth protecting." People started stopping by to take pictures. Some left flowers, others small stones, little tokens of respect. It became a kind of symbol for the town, a reminder that not everything could be bought or bulldozed. And I guess that's the real story here. Not just about fighting an HOA or exposing a corrupt developer, but about standing up, even when the odds look impossible. Because sometimes all it takes to change everything is one person who refuses to back down. Now every evening, I walk down to the lake and watch the sun set behind the ridge. The light hits the new trees just right, gold on green, and I swear if you listen closely enough, you can still hear the echo of my grandfather's hammer on the beams of this old cabin. A reminder, a promise, that no matter how many years pass, this land will always know who it belongs to. HO tried to evict me from the cabin, but it was my grandfather's land all along. And in the end, I didn't just keep the land. I kept the story, because some stories are too sacred to lose.